and around the world in every tongue, to every nation, tribe, and clan. The gospel must be preached to every man. So who will go and light the way that leads lost souls to Christ? Who will go and lay down?
I'm not a public speaker, but I told the Lord that whenever He asked me to speak, that I would speak. And so that's why I'm here this morning. I want to share some things with you about my own experience. But before I get to that, I'd like to share some about another family. Those of you that have been with FaithCamp for some time may know the Mandigo family. They're working in Kenya, and they're starting a Bible school there. This is a picture of them. So I was in Kenya as well, and then we connected. I met them at last FaithCamp, and they told me they were going to Kenya, and so they were excited because I was planning to go to Kenya also. And so when I got there, I connected with them, and so they came to Nairobi, and they spent some time in my house. And so this is a picture from our studio there at 2CBN, and they were able to come and spend some time, and so that's the last time I saw Lauren. It was, I think, about a month later that I talked to them on the phone, and they said he was sick with malaria. And this was like Sunday morning, and he had been sick for some time that week, and then so they said they were on the way to the hospital Sunday morning. Sunday night, I got a phone call, and they said that he passed away. And so he left Lisa and 3 daughters and 1 son. And they have decided to continue the project there. Their family wants them to come home, and I think sometimes they want to go home, but they want to see the project go forward. This is the house where they live. It's a bit small. That's an understatement. It's small. We have here. It's probably the size of this carpet, smaller than the size of this carpet. And they have rainwater. They get the rainwater from the roof. So that's where they're living now. Then they were planning to build their own house, and then they were going to move to that house. But this is the only building on the property right now. God provided this property for them out in the middle of Maasai land. Maasai is a tribe of a people group in Kenya. And so they're working out there to build a Bible school, to train people to do Bible work out there. And other kinds of things, just altogether education that's holistic and includes all the different aspects of practical education. This is their kitchen and bedroom and living room and everything else. They're very good cooks. It was very nice to be able to spend time with them when I was there. This is a little bit more. You can see they have 2 beds up on top of the loft there. This was the day I traveled out there. I traveled on Wednesday, I think, after he passed away, and they had come to the small town where the hospital was, where he had died. And Kyle was another volunteer missionary working with them at the time. He built this coffin from some boards that they had there at the place. So this was the funeral service. A lot of people showed up. There was people. I mean, you see these people, but there was people sitting over there, and there was people sitting on the other side, and then there was people there, and then there was more people behind. It's kind of the African culture. They just come and, they sat wherever there was shade. So, but they all wanted to be there. It made a big impact because they were missionaries in the sense that they integrated with the people, and they wanted to fit in with the people as much as they could. And so it made a big impact, and a lot of people came because they knew them. Now, the Sabbath after, they've been praying that they could be of an impact on the people that they've been working with. And so they were praying about that, and the Sabbath after, kids had come before on Sabbath and they had some program and stuff, but the kids were all dirty and whatever. They just came like they were. The Sabbath after the funeral, all these little kids came and they were clean and they had nice clothes on. So it was just like affirmation that God had something for them to do there. And then this is a picture of them afterwards. That was the weekend after the funeral. But they've gone through ups and downs. And all in all, God has a work for them to do. And they have struggles, they have things that come up. You know, they're trying to build a school with the people you see in that picture. They're building buildings, they're pouring cement, and all these different things. You know, they know how to do it. Lauren had taught them how to do these things, but they don't have the experience he had with it. And so I was talking with Lisa last week, or even this week, before I left Kenya, and we were just talking, and she said, you know, if we could get a group of people to come and just do some building for maybe 2 weeks or something like that, it'd be tremendous help, because they have several buildings they need to build. They have 2 foundations already laid, but they have to finish out the buildings, and then they have other buildings that they need to build. So we're just praying that somehow we could have a group of people, builders, construction people, that can go and help them with that. This is a church close to where they live. It's an Adventist church. It's a Maasai church. In Kenya, the national languages is Swahili and English. But this church, so most of the time, church will be in Swahili or English. But this church is in Maasai. So when you go there, you hear them speaking Maasai. And because almost all the people that are there know Maasai. And a lot of them don't know Swahili. They're just uneducated and they don't know. So we went there, and they came and they asked somebody to do the sermon. And so I think that day Victoria gave the sermon. And so it's just a tremendous, I mean, I went there and it's my first time to this little church, but it's neat to see how much they've blended in with the people. You know, they go and they sit on the same chairs that these people are sitting on. You know, that's a dirt floor, and it's just beautiful to see how they fit in with the people that are there. So they said to give their regards to everyone here. They wish they could be here, but they're not able to be here. This was from the funeral with the casket. So in missionary work, there's 3 things that I was able to think of that are kind of key things. There's cultural differences that come when you go to another country. There's culture, and it's so different, and that's one of the things that can be a struggle sometimes. Just to be able to integrate with the culture and be able to do what God's sending you there to do. Sometimes integrating with the culture and working with the culture and getting things done in the culture can be a challenge. And so it demands flexibility. It depends a lot of flexibility, and that's one thing that I've learned in being a missionary, is that whatever you end up doing, that you have to be flexible. If you're not flexible, it's hard to be effective. And another thing that happens that you find a lot of times is the living is much more simple than we're used to here in America. So if I've grown up and lived my whole life in America, I remember the first time I went overseas, it was such a culture shock. I was reeling for about a month before I could adjust. And I was only 20. So the first place I went in my missionary work was in Cameroon. Cameroon is in the central West Africa. If you follow the coast of Africa up, it's right there in the corner where the line goes from north to start going west. It's right there in the corner. And there's one story from my experience there that I want to share. You see, this is in Lassen. We have a school in Lassen, and when I was there, we only had about 5 people coming to the church there. And so I went there. These are 4, you see, but one of them was from far. I was working with him, and we had both traveled there. The one on the right, that's Charles. But you see this guy in the middle with the pink shirt. His name is Jeffrey. And I remember going there. We got there like I think it was in the middle of the week. It was like Wednesday. And he was there. He came to the place, and I saw him there reading the Bible. And I remember going over and sitting next to him, and I started talking to him, and he was reading John 14. He's like, this is my favorite place in the Bible. Favorite place to read. And let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe in me. And he was reading through that. And I was like, wow. He didn't have his own Bible. He came to the church because there was a Bible there. And so I remember seeing him there. And then I remember asking him, Swell, have you ever read in Genesis? And I never forget, he looked at me. He says, where's Genesis? I said, turn to the beginning of the Bible. So he turned to the beginning of the Bible, and he read Genesis 1 for the very first time. And God created this, and God created that, and God created that. It's like, wow. And that's when I realized there's so many people out there that don't know. They don't have any idea. What happened in Cameroon was I was wanting to be a mission pilot. I've grown up when I was even young, and I read these stories about missionaries that would go out into these places out in the middle of nowhere, and I wanted to be a missionary. And I remember in particular stories about mission pilots and people flying out and taking people out of these places that were where they had medical emergencies or whatever the case was, going and preaching, going and doing these different things, and I wanted to do that. But God had other plans. But from the time of 10, I told my parents, I said, I want to go to the mission field. I want to go and be a missionary. And I wanted a whole family to go. I was only 10. But it didn't happen. There was reasons. My parents had reasons why. And so after some time, after about 10 years, when I turned 20, I finally went by myself. And so I went to Cameroon. And what I found out is that things don't always turn out the way you seem. The way that it seems. It doesn't turn out the way that the way you think it will. Not all the time. And so I went there to work and learn flying and stuff like this. But instead, God had me build a school. Well, helped to build a school. I didn't do everything. But this was Brother Desmond, and he was helping us to build this school here. He was the main kind of technical guy. And this school was in a little village called Yatu. It's just outside of Douala, which is the main port city of Cameroon. And so I was working, helping to build the school. We cleared the land and stuff like this. The chief had said, I want to give you this land so you can build a school. He said, you can have all of this land. And it was a big area, larger than you needed for just a school. So we went there and we started building the school and stuff, and all the villagers kind of came and saw and whatever, and they said, oh, they won't finish, stuff, because in Cameroon that happens a lot. You come and build, you talk big, you're going to do something, and then kind of halfway through it kind of fizzles out, some money disappears, some stuff like that happens. But we didn't even have enough money to start, to finish. So we just had a little bit of money to start. I think they had like $1,000, and so they went and got some materials and stuff like that. That wasn't near enough to finish the school. So they went and poured the cement, and they made the blocks and made the foundation and raised the walls and stuff like that, and it got further and further and further. And the villagers were like, as further it got, the more excited they got. And the walls went up, and finally it finished. And then there was a school. And the kids came. You see, in this village, they had to hike they had to go like 5 or 6 kilometers to get to school. just walking every day, one way, and then they have to walk back. And so it was a lot for them to do every day, and they weren't able to go. Not all the kids were even able to go to school. Not all the parents could afford it. So they went, and when the school came, there were so many kids that came to school. And I think when I left, there was 51. You understand, this is a small village. And so 51 was a lot of kids. And so, I just learned that God has stuff for me to do even when I'm not doing what I wanted to do. And even still, when I talk to Charles and I communicate with him, he's like, you made such an impact here. People there remember me still. It's been 6 years ago. And so it's just something that I remember. Another thing I ended up doing was passing out Bibles. During the time I was there, we got a shipment of Bibles. 29,000 Bibles came in from Remnant Publications. And so we were able to pass out Bibles to people that didn't have. So I had met Jeffrey that first time we went there, and I believe it was the next time we went there, we were able to give them all Bibles. So that was a blessing. Something I've never experienced before, I've never experienced going and giving Bibles to people. This is a church in the Northwest Province where we gave Bibles, and they were just so thrilled, And we gave Bible lessons too, so that meant they could go out to people and they could do Bible studies with them. And so it just meant a lot to them. Okay, another place that I've gone is India. And India has so many different things. I think John knows, and I think some of you have already gone to India. India is so diverse. There's so much. You see so much diversity in India. You see the rich, you see the poor, you see everything in India. There's places in India that look good, where they have the tourists come, and then there's places that look absolutely horrible. But there's so much need. There's so much need in India in so many ways. But in the biggest way is that they need to know Christ, and they don't know. You see out there people that are dirty, they're poor, they're sleeping on the street, and you realize they don't know. They don't have any knowledge. I was going there to work. I went there with a pastor. His name is Pastor Jeff Jordan, and he is deaf. He's the only deaf pastor employed by the conference. His church is actually about 2 miles down the road. So I met him, and he told me he was planning to go to India. So I said, "Hey, I'd like to go with you and do some recording, with the video, so I can get some make a video and show the need of deaf missions." Because I realized there's 19 million deaf people in India, and nobody thinks about deaf missions. Of course, you think of missions and you think of deaf people, but I had never connected the two. And so I went with him and did some stuff there. We went to a deaf school, and these kids were here, and they're just so happy. It's a Christian deaf school. They've known about Jesus, and they just have the smile on their face, and you can see that they're happy. But then you go out in other places, you don't see this on other people's face. In India, it's very simple life. You don't see that in America. This is Israel Prasad. He's the director for Jesus for Asia in India. And I spent a month in India. The first week I spent with Pastor Jeff Jordan, and the rest of it I spent with Israel. So we went to some different places, and we again passed out Bibles. You may recognize this man here on the right. His name is Sanjay Singh. We made a video about him. At the time, he had a church scattered between 22 villages. He had a church of about 1,300 church members. And they had 5 songbooks, and half of the church had Bibles. And so I was able to meet him when I went there, and we were able to take Bibles to his area, his whole church, and then the churches nearby, and it was such a blessing just to meet him and the songbooks. Yeah, the songbooks. We took songbooks and Bibles because they only had 5 songbooks. So then everybody was able to get a songbook. so it's just such a blessing to be able to be a part of that and to give, God's word to these people. And there you see they're holding them up, the songbook and the Bible, and they're holding. And they're just so happy, We also had some baptisms. It was a pleasure. I mean, it was thrilling to see people giving their lives to God. And then they have the Bible to read it, India's very crowded. There's a lot of need. You see a lot of people with hopeless looks on their faces. This I don't think this girl even has a home. She might be an orphan. I saw her in the middle of the road, and she was begging from people. This man I saw sitting along the side of the road. You see hope in that face? I don't. There's some Muslims this was in North India, and there's Muslims there as well. So it's another group that we have to reach out to. Also, I went to Thailand this last year and did some work in Thailand. That's me and my brother. And we went with John and the Van Burens and the Adams and Helmets. Yeah, and then I think that was, Yeah, but that was in India, wasn't it? So we went with them to India. So we went to Thailand, and I saw Bangkok, and as much as I love Bangkok, it's still crowded, and there's a lot of people, and there's a lot of worldliness in Bangkok. And so you just get this huge sense of this need in Bangkok of people, because there's so many people, and they're not Christian. Here, you can go to New York, whatever, people know who Jesus is. But if you go there, people don't know. John, you went around and asked people, and people don't really know in the park. People in Thailand are loving. They're so caring about you. Even I met somebody that I worked with in Africa. I met him in Bangkok when I was there. And he told me, he's like, they're so caring, they're so nice and everything, because I went to his hotel, and when I was leaving, the lady there was just helping me with everything, to get a taxi and whatever to leave. It's like, in Africa, it's not like that, And I know that too, but it's just nice to see. But at the same time, they need so much. They need materials, they need missionaries, they need so much there. I had the opportunity to go across the border out of Thailand into Burma. This is a small school across the border in Karen State, which is where they call Karen State. And I went over there, and I was able to do some recording over there. And, they've been doing war. There's been a war going on over there for a long time. And so it's neat to see these people where they're there, and they've gone through so much hardship in their life, and they do so much, but yet they have this trust in God. There's a quote from Hudson Taylor that I'd like to share. He says, "After proving God's faithfulness for many years, I can testify that times of want have ever been times of spiritual blessing, or have led to them." And these people are in want. They go through so much hurt and pain. Here in America, it's easy to forget the pain that other people go through in other countries. And so that made an impression on me. That's a mall in Bangkok. That's the Thai Adventist Mission. That's the ABC, which I understand they had closed. They have closed. It's still closed, right? There's no Ellen White books. It's downsized. But they don't have a printing press, because there's no books that are translated, I think. Not enough books that are translated. The lack of materials is so small. Yeah, they don't have the money to print. So there's no resources. But it's sad to see a printing press closed and a bookstore opened when they don't have the books to sell. So the other part I wanted to share is about Kenya. I spent the year of 2012 working in Kenya with our TV station in Kenya. We went from having no team and no equipment to having a team doing production, broadcasting through the local TV. And then I also went this year in January, and then I've just come this week. Gary Roberts, this is Gary here. He's the one that asked me to come in the first place. And he asked me to come and to help set up a team, bring some equipment, teach them how to use it so they could start doing production. So we did that. We were able to get some equipment. We had a small budget, but we were able to get enough to go and do. You see, it's very simple there, but that's what we had to work with. That's actually not everything that we had, but this was an off-site shoot, and we didn't carry everything. But one of the things that I've learned in God's work is that if God calls you to go and do something, don't sit back and wait until all the obstacles are removed. Don't wait until you have all the money. Don't wait until, like building the school. If we would have waited until all the money was there, we would have never had all the money at one time. So it was only when we stepped out that God kept providing the money to do that. And I found the same thing here. We had just the basic equipment, just enough to do the job. I mean, you've seen what's in the control room here. It's a lot less than that we started off with. But that's a key to doing God's work, is to go ahead with what you have and move forward. You see those little cameras? Does it look familiar? The same cameras we're using. So we moved forward. We did production, and we were doing those different things with production team. We had a team of about 3 people, including me, for the first about 8 months. After about 7 months, God opened the door, and we were able to go on the air. Kenya was transitioning into a period where they were transitioning to digital TV, and so that created room for us. We had gotten a license before, in 2007, I think, but there was no space in the radio spectrum for us to broadcast. So they said, just wait a bit, everything's going digital here in another, soon. Of course, it always takes longer than they thought. So it wasn't until 2012 that we were able to they actually made the transition. But when they made the transition, we were able to go on the air. And so it was a huge blessing, and it was also a burden for me, because it meant a lot more work to do, playlists to make, and programming to prepare, and all of these things. But it was fun because I knew that people were going to see it, and a lot of people did see it. So this is our chairman, board chairman. His name is Francis Droge, and he was signing the papers there to go on the air. And so we stepped out and we moved out in faith. And so we moved out in faith, and we went forward, and people were blessed by the programming. I think at first we just had like these nature videos, Moments of Peace. We had some other programs. We didn't have a lot of programming, so we'd run it over and over again. And then we were converting more, and we'd be able to add some more. But it was a blessing to see how God used just that little programming to bless people, and people would call. They didn't have our number. They didn't even have our number. We didn't have anything to get our number on the screen yet. And so they would call the provider that was broadcasting our signal. See, in Kenya, it's not where we didn't have our own towers. We had to contract with a company that had the towers so that they could do all the broadcasting. That's the way they had set it up when it went digital. So we couldn't have our own towers even if we wanted to. So we had to contract with a company to broadcast. So people knew their number, so they would call them and they say, hey, that channel is really great. And so they would use that channel because we told them that we wanted to broadcast the whole country. And we went on at the very beginning of when digital went official. So we moved, So we told them we wanted to go the whole country. So they said, okay, well, when we go to Mombasa, we'll put you in Mombasa. Then as we advance, we'll put you in these different cities. And so they would put us in the different cities, but we hadn't agreed to pay for all the other ones because they weren't able to give us a price for everything because they hadn't gone on the air in all the places yet. So we had contracted with them for, I think, Nairobi and some of the main cities. But then when they started going beyond that, they were using our channel to test these locations. So they would put all the infrastructure up in this little place, like somewhere out there, and then they would use 2CBN to test everything out and see if everything was working. And people were there with their decoders, picking up our channel. So the first thing they saw on digital TV was our channel. And then after 2 or 3 weeks, they would take the channel off because then they were done testing, then they put all the channels. Then people would call them and say, what happened to that channel? I love that channel. Then they have to put it back on. So it was a real blessing to see how God worked that way. So many people, because they didn't have our number, they would call the number for Star Times, which was the people that were basically the front of the company that we were contracting with to broadcast the signal. They would call them and they'd say, that channel is so wonderful. And so we knew people were being blessed. The company that we're contracting with is Chinese. It's a Chinese company. The guy that was in charge when we were first beginning is a Chinese guy, and he's working. He was the general, the main director of the company there. So it was interesting because after about 2 months or so, he kind of saw our programming. He saw we had a lot of nature videos and stuff like this, and I think he thought it was kind of boring. And so we met with him at some point, and he told Gary, he said, we could help you to get some good programming. You could get some movies and some things like this, and it would help to make the programming better. I think more people would like to watch that way. So Gary, he said, thank you, but our goal is not to be like all the other channels. We want to be different. Because we don't want to compete with them. And so I said, okay, so, of course, it's business, so he wasn't going to try and tell us how to do stuff. 2 months later, we went to visit him again, and he told us, he said, that channel, your channel brings peace. Amen. He started watching it. He said, your channel brings hope. And he told us, he said, he told us that he's been watching the channel, and he said, sometime I want to get together with you guys and we'll forget about business and I want to study the Bible with you. Amen. And so it was just a praise God, because you see how he had started watching it and then he was blessed and he moved, and he was able to see how that content was affecting the people, and then he understood why everybody was calling like that, And people love the program, and they love the moments of peace. They love different things. In Africa, they say this. In Africa, most of the music has a strong beat. It's very heavy on the rhythm and stuff like that. And so they say, people told me this. They said, if music doesn't have rhythm, if it doesn't have beat, or if it doesn't have drums, Africans won't like it. People told me that. But this was proof that it wasn't true, because so many people called and so many people loved the music, and so it was proof of that. So it was just a real blessing to see how God worked with that. So currently we're off the air due to finances, but we're broadcasting through the internet. So if you go to 2cbn.org, you can actually see our stream right now, right here, and anytime you want, anytime you have internet. And then I'd like to share a little bit of my experience in Kenya. It was fun for me to be able to get to know Kenya and be able to get around and stuff like that, because I'd never been in a place before and been on my own and going around places. I never forget the day Gary left in Kenya. And I've never gone on public transport by myself. In anywhere, really. I mean, here in America, we don't have public transport, really. So overseas is a whole nother ballpark, because it's all different. People speak different. They do everything different. And so I never forget the day that Gary left. And I was like, I can't do this. I can't do this. He's leaving me in charge of this. You know, I've been there for only like 2 weeks. No, even 1 week, I think. And then he was leaving. And I was like, I don't know how to do this. And that's when I just prayed and I said, Lord, you have to help me. And he did. You know, he gave me strength, he gave me wisdom, and he helped me to continue and move forward with so many different things. You know, and I remember there's times that I try to call Gary about something, and the phones weren't working because he's in Chad and phones don't work all the time. And sometimes I would try to call a lot. But God always gave me grace to be able to continue and to move forward. And so that was a special way that I saw God work. This is a picture of Nairobi. Have you seen anything like that in America? It's very different. This is an area where they call the bus station. And you see people there selling their clothes and selling all these things. And people are walking through here. This was not a busy time. If it was busy, you could see people everywhere. There's a lot of people in Nairobi. Nairobi's it's not like Bangkok, but there's like 4 million people in the main part of Nairobi. If you count the suburbs, it's about 8 million. So I was working in Nairobi and going on public transport and all these things. And you see so many people in these different places in Nairobi, and you just see how they function, how they work. You know, people on the matatus. This is like the little buses that they use for public transport. They call them matatus, and they go like this. Everybody pretty much takes matatu to get out of town, to get into town, unless you have your own car. And the music is so loud, and there's so much. Some of the buses I went on, the music was absolutely filthy. And you just think, this is the way these people live, you know? And they need God so much. But yet in Kenya, they believe, you know, they're Christians. They believe, you know, they know God. Even, you know, they can do all these bad things, and then they can go to church on Sunday, or they can go to church whenever. And but they need God in a real way. And so, you know, through the television network, through personal meeting them, we can do that. So, let's see. I want to skip over this. No, let me read this. This is a text that I wanted to share with you. It comes from Exodus chapter 14, verse 10 to 16. And when Pharaoh drew nigh, the children of Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians marched after them, and they were sore afraid. And the children of Israel cried unto the Lord, and they said unto Moses, Because there were no graves in Egypt, hast thou taken us away to die in the wilderness? Wherefore hast thou dealt thus with us? Carry us forth out of Egypt. You know, the story is interesting. They were stuck in the front of the Red Sea. They had nowhere to go. Egyptians were coming behind. There was 2 mountains on either side. The sea was ahead of them. They were stuck. And a lot of times in our lives, in mission work, or whatever we're doing, we may feel like we're stuck. We may feel like there's nowhere to go. But God has a way for us to go, and that's forward. He doesn't want us to go backward. He doesn't want us to go to the side. You remember Balaam went to the side. He didn't get off very well. It didn't work very well for him. So God wants us to go forward, and He will open the way. And so that's one thing that I've found in the different things that I've done in different places where I've gone, is no matter what the difficulties you face, continue moving forward. Do what you can. If you can't do everything that you want to do, or everything that you can do all at once, that's fine. Start with what you can do. Do what you can, and move forward, and God will continue opening the way. And that's I think one of the biggest things that I've learned in the time that I've been a missionary. I have to tell you, I couldn't trade being a missionary for anything. I'm a missionary for life. And I can't go back to a normal job. I can't go back to the normal life of Americans. Sometimes you want to, but when it comes down to it, you can't. So right now I'm back in the States. I'm planning to go to school to get some education, but I'm a missionary for life.
Amen.
And I can't go back to anything else. So there's some contact information. My website, my blog is lifeinmission.com. And you can go there and see. I try to post fairly often, but I haven't posted for some few months now. So it's due for an update. But I'm trying to keep it up. So I appreciate your prayers, and let's keep in mind that there is so much need overseas that what we can do here is small. I mean, people are needed here in America, it's true, but there's so much need overseas. It's like helping on the end of the log that everybody's helping. You know, if you have a log, a huge log, and everybody's going to the top where it's small, you know, and you have 100 people around the top, and they're all lifting the top, and down there is like 2 small guys on the bottom side. Which side are you going to help on? You know? So you want to help where the need is greatest. So there's a lot of need overseas, and I encourage you, if you can, help overseas with funds or with personal effort, or if you can go yourself, do it, because there's nothing else you can do. So I just want to encourage you to do what you can and move forward.
How